Welcome back to the show, everyone. It's DinaKalmeta here. And for today's news, we have a lot to unravel from the last few days. From the Middle East to Europe to Asia, the headlines are on fire. But I first want to talk about what is most urgent, and that is Iran, Israel, and the United States. According to a report in Axios, the Trump administration may be closer to launching a major military conflict in the Middle East than much of the American public realizes, and such action could start soon. The report says that any U.S. strike in Iran would likely extend far beyond a limited operation. Sources cited say it would resemble a sustained weeks-long military campaign rather than a short targeted strike. Per the report, officials expect any action to involve close coordination with Israel. Regarding the timing, we were told that President Trump had given Iran around 30 days to make a decision. But now, the report says that Israeli officials are preparing for a possible conflict within days and are advocating for an expansive campaign that could target not only Iran's nuclear and missile capabilities, but potentially the regime itself. Some U.S. sources, however, believe action could still be weeks away. The report also notes that the U.S. officials have given Iran a 2-week window to present a detailed proposal following the latest round of talks. It draws a parallel to last June, when a similar 2-week deadline preceded Trump's decision to authorize Operation Midnight Hammer just days later. In addition, the Times of Israel is reporting that the American military has moved dozens of fighter jets towards the Middle East over the past day, according to open-source flighting tracking data, as the U.S. and Iran held their second round of talks in Switzerland. They include the F-22, F-35, and F-16 jets. Several refuelers have also been spotted on the move. A U.S. official also confirmed to the Axios news site that more than 50 fighter jets have been moved to the region in the past 24 hours. With that being said, Iran had fired live missiles towards the Strait of Hormuz while its supreme leader warned that the U.S. warship deployed in the Gulf could be sunk. In his speech on Tuesday, he said that we constantly hear that they, the U.S., have sent a warship towards Iran. A warship is certainly a dangerous weapon, but even more dangerous is a weapon capable of sinking it. Definitely some fighting words coming from Iran. Now, in addition to that, just yesterday, Iran announced a temporary and partial closure of the Strait of Hormuz, citing security precautions for live-fire military drills conducted by the Revolutionary Guard. This move, described as a rare show of force, occurred as Iranian and U.S. negotiators held their indirect nuclear talks in Geneva. Now, of course, the U.S. considers freedom of navigation through the strait a red line. But here's a piece from Michael Schneider of The Most Important News that I'd also like to talk about. Anyone that thinks that a final showdown with Iran would be a nice, neat campaign that would be over in just a few weeks is not being realistic. It certainly didn't work out that way in Afghanistan or Iraq, did it? The Iranians have spent the last 6 months feverishly preparing for the next war with the United States and Israel. Weapons from Russia and China have also been pouring in. The Iranians are now in a far better position militarily than they were during the 12-day war last year. Of course, U.S. preparations for the upcoming war also continue to ramp up. Chinese commercial satellite imagery has confirmed a surge in U.S. Air Force deployments of the KC-135 aerial refueling tankers to the airbase in Qatar, with at least 16 of the aircraft seen at runways at the facility. The release of the images closely coincides with the exposure of the exact positions of U.S. Army MIM-104 Patriot air defense missile systems at the airbase and follows the publication of Chinese commercial satellite imagery from the Chinese satellite company Mazar Vision confirming the deployment of the U.S. Army THAAD anti-missile system at the airbase in Jordan. Unconfirmed reports have indicated that Chinese satellite intelligence and communications is being provided to significantly strengthen Iran's ability to withstand a possible U.S.-led assault and launch retaliatory attacks, fueling speculation that the publication of images on the positions of potential targets may be intended to send a signal that Iran's targeting intelligence will be significantly greater in a future conflict due to Chinese support. And CBS News is telling us that the USS Gerald R. Ford is being deployed to the Middle East. When push comes to shove, the U.S. and Israel will be hammering Iran at the same time, and the goal will be regime change. He also notes that Iran could use unconventional weapons, in which Israel will not hesitate to strike back with overwhelming force. And then we will really have an apocalyptic scenario on our hands. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is insisting on any potential deal is that all enriched material has to leave Iran. The second is that there will be no enrichment capability, not stopping the enrichment process, but dismantle the equipment and the infrastructure that allows you to enrich in the first place. Netanyahu added that any agreement should also address Iran's ballistic missile program, citing a 300-kilometer range limit under the MTCR. He also said that any agreement should also address its support for Iran's regional allied groups. Iran, of course, will never agree to any of that. In fact, they will never agree to any restrictions on their ballistic missile program under any circumstances. Over and over, the Iranians have made it abundantly clear that they are not willing to give the U.S. and Israel what they want. And apparently, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner have told President Trump that it will be difficult to impossible to make any sort of a deal. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio is trying to get everyone to understand that nobody has ever been able to do a successful deal with Iran. And even if Trump changed his mind and decided not to go in, Israel has already told us that they were going to go in anyway. Of course, the Chinese will be very upset with us when we go after Iran because somewhere between 13% and 15% of the oil that they import comes from the Iranians. And the Russians have very close ties with the Iranians as well. This could be the spark that throws the entire planet into a state of turmoil. And that would be especially true if unconventional weapons are used. We are close to a real nightmare, but I don't think that there will be any turning back now. I am not so sure how much more volatile it can get in the Middle East. And Michael makes a very valid point. Even if President Trump doesn't strike Iran, Israel is not going to let Iran build up their ballistic missile program. So we may see something a lot more serious than we saw at the 12-day war. Now, hopefully not, and cooler heads will prevail, but only time will tell. But with that said, switching gears, I would like to talk about what's going on with China and Japan because things are getting a little bit heated over there as well. Authorities in Japan have seized a Chinese fishing boat and arrested its captain in a move that is likely to inflame an ongoing diplomatic row between Tokyo and Beijing. The seizure, which occurred on Thursday about 105 miles from the southwestern port city of Nagasaki, came after the skipper refused an order to stop for an onboard inspection. Japan's chief cabinet secretary told reporters on Friday that we will continue to take resolute action in our enforcement activities to prevent and deter illegal fishing operations by foreign vessels. The foreign ministry in Beijing urged Japan to protect the crew's members' rights, adding that the Chinese government required the country's fishers to operate in accordance with law. But the incident comes at a tense time for bilateral ties, weeks after Japan's prime minister sparked a furious row over the future of Taiwan. Speaking to MPs in November, the prime minister of Japan said that they could become militarily involved in the event of an attempted Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Those remarks, which she refused to withdraw, prompted Beijing to call on Chinese nationals not to travel to Japan as tourists or students and led to the cancellation of cultural events. Now, with that being said, it's also been reported that the U.S. presented new seismic data Tuesday to buttress its recent allegation that China has secretly carried out low-yield nuclear tests. A senior department official said that a seismic monitoring station in Kazakhstan had detected a 2.75 magnitude event on June 22, 2020. The U.S. has accused China of conducting clandestine low-yield nuclear tests at that time. Christopher Yu, an assistant secretary of state, said that we are aware that China conducted a nuclear explosive test. The U.S. allegation comes at a time when the Trump administration is seeking to pressure Beijing to join potential talks with the U.S. and Russia on drafting a new accord to limit nuclear weapons. Trump said last year that the U.S. would resume nuclear testing on an equal basis with China and Russia. The administration has yet to order a resumption of nuclear tests, but American officials have said that if they proceed, any U.S. tests would be similar to the low-yield nuclear detonations it has accused China and Russia of conducting. President Trump is planning to visit Beijing for a summit with the Chinese leader in April. In the meantime, the U.S. plans to deploy more missile launchers to the Philippines despite China's alarm. China, of course, has voiced concerns over these deployments, which include the Typhoon mid-range missile systems, and Philippines president has refused China's demand to remove these systems. U.S. and Philippine officials recently discussed defense strategies and plans for joint military exercises. The U.S. aims to enhance the Philippine military while supporting regional security as part of a U.S.-Philippines bilateral strategic dialogue. Now, with that said, and switching gears, Secretary of State Marco Rubio delivered a message of reassurance in remarks to the Munich Security Conference, calming some fears that months of sharp U.S. rhetoric and policy disputes had opened a lasting breach between Washington and its European allies. The Secretary of State said that we do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history. Though he admonished European nations for prioritizing welfare programs over self-defense and embracing other policies that threaten their societal cohesion, he framed his critique as part of a shared reckoning. He said, "We make these mistakes together, and now together we owe it to our people to face those facts and to move forward to rebuild." He argued that post-war euphoria had led the West into a dangerous delusion of borderless globalization and over-reliance on international institutions. He said this was a foolish idea that ignored both human nature and the lessons of 5,000 years of recorded human history, and it has cost us dearly. In a time of headlines heralding the end of transatlantic era, let it be known and clear to all that it is neither our goal nor our wish. For us Americans, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe. On China, Rubio said that Washington has an obligation to communicate with Beijing, even as fundamental challenges remain, and stressed that any engagement must protect U.S. national interests. Everything right now is falling perfectly into place as it pertains to prophecy. Wars and rumors of wars, distress of nations, and then, of course, what we're seeing in the Middle East right now. Jesus said that when you begin to see these things come to pass, to look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. And I believe that that day is fast approaching. But I'd love to hear from all of you, so please do leave me your comments below. Tell me what you think about what's going on with China, Japan, NATO, the Middle East. I want to hear from you guys. Also, when you have a free moment, come and visit me on my social media pages, as well as my website. But that's what I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, God bless and stay safe.